The human being is composed of three main dimensions. We can compare them with three Russian dolls. The first Russian doll of the human being is the body. And God does not need to send a prophet to the human being to remind the human being to nourish his body, to feed himself. Like saying, for example, in the Bible or Quran, "Oh, you human being, don't forget to feed yourself." It's not necessary, because naturally the human being knows that if he doesn't do it, he will feel weak and he will die at the end. Then the second Russian doll inside the body is the ego, the little I am. Meaning that each human being, when reaching 2 or 3 years old, start to have a conscience and to have a I am, an ego. And the same, the human beings don't need a prophet or a Buddha to tell them and to remind them to think about themselves. As each morning when we get up, we all think first about ourselves, our project, to be loved, to have money, etc. So we don't need a prophet that would say, "Oh, human beings, don't forget to think about yourself and your project." Because as soon as we are 2 or 3 years old, like I said, the soul starts to say, "I am, it's mine, I want." And then the third Russian doll that is imprisoned inside the jail of the ego is the spirit. But the spirit needs a prophet to be free, as the spirit exists only potentially. Potentially, as the spirit is imprisoned, recovered by the ego. Because the human being, unlike the animals and the plants, have the I am, the ego. This I am, this ego, is a kind of false divinity who wants to be the rival of God, the Lord, the real God. The characteristic of the human is that he wants to be his own God. I am, I know, I am my own God. So the life is an exam for the ego to be linked to God, to his Lord, because since generation to generation, the human beings forgot God. Especially in the modern time, we put God beside. So the second Russian doll covers the third Russian doll. The third Russian doll is the soul that admits God. So when the second Russian doll starts to lose weight and power, the third Russian doll can be free and can worship God. The second and the third Russian doll are not two different entities. Just the third Russian doll is the second Russian doll that has lost weight and power. So the second Russian doll starts to enlighten her own light by saying God, God, and not I am, I am. So the 313 prophets sent by God on the earth had as a mission to guide people and to teach people how to worship God the Lord. So it's a kind of match and challenge between the absolute, God, the real Lord, and the relative, the creature. God created the whole universe and is acting by billion interconnections. Those billion of interconnections are either in the macrocosm, the universe, or either in the microcosm, in the human being's body, in the cellular scale, for example. So in some kind, the human being wants to take the place of God by being his own God and forgetting this depth. He will pass all his life and most of the time will say, I am, and will forget God. So the human being is impotent and powerless in 99% of the parameter. But although this weakness, he still wants to be his own God and to build his Babel Tower. So in our modern time, we have everywhere the God of pop music, the God of football, the God of boxing. Everything is like that. There are idols everywhere. And it was in the age of enlightenment during the 17th and 18th century that the Western philosophy, materialist and atheist, invade the world. It was a materialist philosophy that planned to erase all the religions and spiritualities. And those religions were, for the age of enlightenment, only ridiculous superstitions. They limited the human beings as only an intellectual entity. And they promoted to nourish the oversized ego. And they spread the idea that the white Western man was superior, like a kind of Aryan race, superior to the other ethnicities. And in the field of spirituality, like say the expression that it's of course false, this false expression say God is dead and the human being killed him. In the sense that in the modern time, the first Russian doll and the second, the body and the ego, are overnourished. And that the third Russian doll is now like a old dusty church, a forgotten church. The third Russian doll is imprisoned by the second Russian doll, and the second Russian doll is like a hostage taker. But this hostage taker doesn't ask for nothing, just make the third Russian doll forgotten and disappear. So the philosopher of the Age of Enlightenment claim that they were fighting all kind of superstitions. So anything that was linked to the third Russian doll, to God, to the religion or spirituality was qualified as a superstition coming from barbarian people. The superior white man was coming with the light of knowledge and democracy to save the white Asian, African and Arabic people. Then the American culture get the link between the human being and God worse. So the new phenomenal culture made the human being regressing. The human being was not an intellectual entity anymore, as there was a tsunami to promote the cult of the body. The human must become a machine of seduction to exist, and the woman become a sexual object. The clear message is be attractive or you don't deserve to exist and to live. And if you are not beautiful, be rich. To sum up, the modern world is over pushing the material and egocentrical aspect. It's an explosion of the five senses, faster, higher, stronger in all the fields. It's the epoch of excessiveness. It's the epoch of the elevation of the mega ego. To build our own Babel Tower and to outmatch God. And the ultimate goal is to become a human God, a false divinity. But before the invasion of the Age of Enlightenment, all the world, either it was in Asia, in the Islamic world, in America, or in Europe, had a spiritual tradition. And the common point of all this tradition was to be based on the community and not on the individualism and egocentrism. So the values of sharing were far more present than in our modern time. And also another spiritual principle was that beyond the five senses, there is another reality that we must reach by some spiritual exercises. To reach the third Russian doll, the enlightenment or the light of God. But we can reach this light only by lowering and put down the ego and by humility. And by the image of the three Russian dolls, we can easily understand the biblical expression. It's easier for a camel to enter the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Here, the rich man means the rich by his ego, by his second Russian doll. This second Russian doll that is enormous and overweight. He can enter the third Russian doll only by lowering the ego and the excessive love for this lower world, the passion. But watch out, be ready for a terrible war. The Sufi and Islam say that it is the biggest war, the spiritual war. This is the terrible war between the second Russian doll, the ego, and the third Russian doll, the spirit. The second Russian doll will do everything to impeach the third Russian doll to get birth and to win. Actually, all the opposition, wars and match present on the earth manifest this struggle between the two Russian dolls. Like a sport team, the second Russian doll will send her most ferocious defender to impeach the third Russian doll to get birth. We can also compare it like a jealous woman that will never leave the third Russian doll in peace. She will do everything to switch her off and to throw her away. We can also compare the second Russian doll like a dictatorial country like Israel or the ancient colonialist countries like France or Britain. At the beginning, they are gaining slowly some ground, and slowly they dominate the other countries without leaving them anything. And they impose an imperialism like slavery. And same, the second Russian doll, the ego, launch its attack in the war and like a spider mummify its prey in the spider web. And like this, the human is mummified by 5,000 projects, mummified by 5,000 activities, mummified by 5,000 parties, mummified by 5,000 TV programs, mummified by 5,000 sport programs, mummified by this life and the different steps and occupations. And thus life pass and time pass, and the human completely forgot his third Russian doll. Like he doesn't know where is it anymore, like completely disappeared. And thus God completely disappeared in his heart, or is only like a dusty attic in the third floor of a house. So the conclusion is that the most terrible war is not on the TV news, but on yourself.